I'm so honored to be on the TENS board after using the TENS materials in the congregation that I am so honored to serve in the Diocese of Maryland, which is St. Andrews in Glenwood, Maryland, so right in the middle of Maryland. And being a somewhat small congregation with one clergy staff person and lots of wonderful volunteers, we really have relied on the TENS materials over the years and the good work of your predecessors and you, Davey. So it's an honor to be on the board. And I'm really glad to be here today because I want to learn. I want to share anything I might know that would be useful. And mostly for my colleagues out there that are running stewardship campaigns and know how hard it is to pause and evaluate. That's very much where I've been with our efforts at St. Andrews. It's very hard not to get caught up in the next acute financial challenge, and which kind of becomes chronic. We've got chronic financial challenges and acute financial challenges. And it's very hard to pause and look at the overarching stewardship plan and program from the year before when you're just trying to figure out how you're going to meet that budget gap or who's going to sign the thank you cards. There's so much work to be done. And so I'm really excited to be here today and to renew my commitment to doing really good evaluation work at the end of each TENS program year. So thanks for inviting me to participate, Davey. I'm really glad to host this with you.
Thank you again. It's really great to have you here, and I really appreciate your time. And I appreciate all of your time. You're all giving up a little piece of your Saturday to be here today, so thank you for that.
So Davey, since we are sitting here, it's a beautiful Saturday in Maryland, sunshiny but cold, but lots of folks are giving up time to be here. So tell us, what can we expect to learn today? Because I am definitely here to learn.
Great. So am I, by the way. I always
Good.
learn a lot from these sessions, from the questions that get asked and the stories that get told. So we're all in this together. But today our presentation is going to focus on a few key areas. We're going to first talk about the campaign that your congregations have most recently completed. So we'll take a look at some best practices on how to review and analyze the numbers. What are the other questions that you need to ask when you're going and thinking about your campaign? It's not just about numbers. And also some reflection. So when we finish a campaign, often we're so happy just to get it done. But spending some time thinking about it and reflecting on it is really helpful. So we'll go through some tools about that. And then we'll shift into, well, how do you start preparing for your next campaign? I know it's January 23rd, and here we are talking about your very next pledge campaign. You may still be collecting gifts from last year's, but here we are. And so thinking about the ways throughout this year that we can help you and help each other develop and form ourselves theologically and think about the stewardship or pledge campaign as it comes forward will be really helpful. So we'll share some tools around that, around setting goals, around recruiting a stewardship committee, and how that might work. And then we'll talk about ongoing formation. What can you do in your congregation or your diocese to keep the conversation alive? So thank you for that. I'm really excited to go through this with y'all. We're going to start with that little fun quiz that I mentioned earlier, and I'm going to share my screen with something new. This is called Mentimeter, and I don't know if you've ever used this before. It's an interactive quiz where you and your coworkers or your colleagues or whatever can share something fun and do this work together. So I want to share that with you. He says, trying to find how to share his screen all of a sudden. Bear with me.
I'll chat while you get that sorted. How about that, Davey?
That sounds like a
good plan. One of the things I want to affirm is with COVID especially, and learning how to do fundraising and pledge campaigns with very new technology for some of us anyway, it's been more of a scramble than usual. And I'm really grateful, Davey, for this topic with TENS today, because I want to move away from that scramble and learn some lessons that we've grown in a lot of ways around giving methods and increased ways of giving. And I want to capture those lessons and get out of that scramble mode. So I'm glad it's January 23rd and we're doing this. Oh,
Right?
there it is.
Here we are. So if you go to use your phone or another screen and you follow the link at the top, somebody's already grateful for tea. Thank you. Put this in. It's going to make a word cloud. We'll give this a couple of minutes to update live. I love it. Generosity. Sunshine. Yes. Here in San Francisco, we are between storms. It rained all day yesterday. It's going to rain all day tomorrow. But today we have sun. It's beautiful. I love these answers. Thank you. Lots of people are excited about sunshine. Thank you so much for filling this in. I see some people excited about transition and leadership. A beautiful lake, shelter from the cold. Thank you for reminding us about that. It's important on these cold days. New ideas. I hope that we have some of those. Generosity, life, grateful for life and health and family. Those words are getting big. So that means lots of you are repeating those words in our word cloud. So thank you for that. Tea tends to get high results here too. I like it. When we do a gratitude exercise when we look at this kind of work together, we're reminding ourselves as a community that there is so much abundance in the world, so many things for which we're grateful. And so I'm really glad that you're participating in this, that we are grateful for so many things. I'm going to give this another couple of seconds and build this word cloud out. And then we're going to move on to the next slide. People grateful for first responders, for God in their lives. Thank you for that, for reminding us, for being alive, just being alive. We don't always remember to be grateful for that. Every day we open our eyes. Vaccines, your parish family, coffee. See, so that's my thing. Tea is lovely for some people, but I'm a coffee drinker. So thank you for that. Well, thank you for all of this. Grandchildren, shared wisdom. I'm going to move on to our next slide, and you'll be able to participate in the next poll. Thank you for this. I will take screenshots of all this, and it'll be a part of our presentation too. You'll be able to see what you are all grateful for. So this is a ranking question. Thinking about pledge campaigns that you've been a part of, or maybe the one you just finished in your congregation, please rank the following questions. Success, is that the first thing that's most important in a campaign? Is it about thanking everyone? Is it about having a high rate of participation? Finishing on time? Having fun? I know some people can't participate in this. I'm sorry about that, but I'm glad that those who can are. Look at that pop in. Gratitude, hot success, participation rate. I love seeing these answers come in. Look at that. It's more exciting than watching election results, I tell you. This is thrilling. Having a high participation rate, staying at the top. I feel like a sports commentator and talking about minute by minute results. This is really, I love that is the ranking high thing right now. Participation in your campaign, regardless of the numbers it generates, is its own kind of success. And I'm really proud of you all for ranking that so high.
Davey, I think that we're still on the grateful screen. If there's a way to show us the ranking screen, or will that still come up in a few minutes?
Oh, really? I'm seeing it.
Oh. Well, this is good, friends. If you want to use Menti, we're working out the bugs for you so that you'll know how to do it.
Right. Well, let me try stopping the share and restarting it.
Yeah.
How
I
about
can see perfect. Thank you.
that? Look at that.
That's neat. Thank
Okay.
you.
Yeah, you bet. Well, thank you for answering that question. So high participation rate seems like the winning ranking thing. I love that answer, and that's beautiful. Also finishing on time, coming in fifth, but also important in a campaign. All right, I'm going to move on to the next question. And this one is about what words you use or what idea you use to describe a campaign in your congregation. Across the church, we use lots of different words to describe our pledge campaigns. What is it that you use in your church? Stewardship campaign seems high. Look at all those dots zip out. A big cluster around stewardship campaign and pledge campaign. Really good numbers for gratitude or generosity, reminding us that those are our big motivations to raise money in our congregations, the things that we're most grateful for. Look at that. So a lot of us are using stewardship campaign, which is what I've always grown up and used. A lot of us using pledge campaign. I tend to try to write that word when I'm creating materials, pledge campaign, because then it applies to all the kinds of campaigns that we run. But I like it. Look at that. 60 of you have responded to this. And that's the way our results skew. This is beautiful. Thank you so much. I like that. Well, this helps us. This will help me in knowing how to communicate with you all about the words that you like to use for your campaign. Moving on to our next slide. This one is about thinking about the way your materials are shared in your congregation. And this is inviting you to say, so maybe you wrote the materials, or maybe you just read them, maybe you handed them out. And these are about your perception. So do you think the members of your congregation know how their gifts are used? And it's asking you to agree or disagree with these statements. You think the members of your congregation could name most of the ministries or the mission of your congregation? Wow, strong marks. I think my congregation's campaign materials are inspiring, and people in your congregation feel good about making their gift to the church. I love it. I really appreciate the conversation that's happening in the chat too about this. I will send you all the chat so you can see it at the end of this. Great ideas and great discussion. Wonderful. So a lot of you feel like the people in your congregation feel good about making their gift to the church. That's important. But then look at where we're starting to skew about inspiring materials, about naming our ministries. I think that indicates that we could use a little bit of work. Maybe TENS should do a session later this year on creating your stewardship campaign materials, how to make your case for giving. This is really helpful information and helpful for all of us who do this work. You got to know why you're raising the money and what it's going for. So thank you for that. I'm going to move on. We have just a couple more of these. So this is asking you, I know everybody uses, every congregation uses a different tagline, or perhaps you used faith-filled generosity, which was the TENS theme for the year. But we're interested in knowing what you used. So was it, great, look at these coming in. Gratitude, Christ is our sure foundation, a good hymn and a good tagline. Well, I like that, a promise, because that's what we're doing here. We're making these promises. This is really good stuff. Look at this. God multiplies the seed. Faith-filled generosity. Thank you for using the tens theme. We really appreciate that. We create a theme every year, and we'll be telling you about this year's theme at the end of our presentation. Really good questions or really good comments here. Thank you. Oh, look at it. It just keeps going. Love, grow, give. Somebody who doesn't remember and says maybe that's a problem. Back again to creating our pledge materials, how we think about that. A lot of gratitude. Thank you so much for making that word so high in your case for giving. It's really important. All right, I see things starting to slow down, so I'm going to move on to our next one. We're almost done here. So this question is about if you do any kind of event-based fundraising in your church. So a lot of congregations might do a gala or a dinner or a bake sale, a talent show in normal years when you might sell tickets and then fill up the parish hall. We did a presentation last year on how to do these virtually. So some people continued to do them, their annual campaign. We'd love to learn more about that. Look at a lot of people do event-based fundraising in congregations. This is really important work. And we don't always think about it. It's an entirely different committee usually that puts it on. It sometimes impacts our bottom line budget, or sometimes it's for a special ministry. Either way, really important, and a lot of churches, it looks like, are doing it. So that's important to learn either also. And some folks are looking to explore it. Thank you. This is really helpful for us and helpful for all of us to see. There are lots of ways to raise money in congregations, and it's not just about our pledge campaigns or our stewardship campaigns. Lots of people in lots of places do different kinds of fundraising. Thank you. One more. So what word or very short phrase describes how you feel about your 2021 fundraising? Going into this year's church fundraising plan, how are you feeling about it? Right. A good mix of hopeful and trepidatious. I think that's common, isn't it? Scared. I hope to talk about that a little bit more. Scared and challenging. These are some times that we're going through and some uncertainty. So I'd love to hear more about that as we move through today's session. Challenging seems to be the big word. And it is. You know, fundraising in church is challenging every year. So no surprise there, but important to see how it impacts us this year, particularly as we move into 2021. Some folks are tired, I know, right? It keeps going, right? It's a cycle. We're going to talk a little bit about that today too, how it's a cycle and how we can maybe make it a little more joyful. I really like this. Thank you for your answers. I'm going to stop this and move on to the rest of our presentation. But thank you so much for participating in this. I really love these quizzes because they're a way to keep us all talking about the issue and learning from each other. So I'm going to start sharing my screen again.
Thank you, Davey, for the quiz. For those of us that haven't used that technology before, I think it's a nice way to open a vestry meeting, a stewardship team meeting. We can't, as somebody who is an extrovert, I like leading worship or being in a meeting and seeing the reaction of people. Menti gave us a little chance to hear from 90 people, or at least have a sense of who else was in the space and how they felt and orient to this content. So thank you for teaching us that, Davey.
Thank you. It's a lot of fun.
Yes, we do have some questions in our Q&A box. Some of those were about how to use Menti, which some of you said, I got it, I figured it out. So that's great. It was a separate technology on your phone or another browser. But we do have our first question today at 1:05 was from Catherine. Will there be webinars around year-round stewardship? The campaign materials and webinars mainly focus on that kind of standard issue pledge campaign that might start in the fall, et cetera, wrap up just before Christmas. And Catherine is looking for ongoing annual materials and forums. What say ye, Davey?
Yes, absolutely. So we are in the process of creating our training calendar. This year we have one session planned already in May. I know that's a long way away. We'll do something in between now and May. We just haven't fleshed it out yet. Our May webinar is going to be about, so we had virtual fundraising 101 in last year in August. We're going to do 201 this year. So how to dig a little deeper in online fundraising and create materials that are built for online fundraising instead of just our paper campaign that we quickly adapt to work online. We will be doing some ongoing year-round stewardship. We're going to model that in some formation, and we'll create a webinar about how you can create a year-round calendar of conversation, formation. So be looking for that. That's going to come out this year, Catherine.
That's great, Davey. We had another question about from Julia. How do we discuss stewardship when a stewardship campaign is so often about raising money, all in caps, money for something? So, money seems to take over the topic of stewardship for so many of us, for vestries, for stewardship teams, for clergy and lay leaders. How do we get fuller? How do we have a more full approach?
Well, I think you all in your word cloud, the very first things that you started talking about were about gratitude and hope. And even as you approach the 2021 word cloud in our little exercise that we just did, you talked about being challenged. You talked about being hopeful. Another question that you answered was about what makes a campaign successful. And the number one thing you ranked was participation. Participation, by the way, is not about money, right? So how do we participate in a stewardship campaign or a pledge campaign when it's not just about money? And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in some ongoing slides about gratitude. But we all participate in stewardship, whether we fill out a pledge form, put it in the plate, or just participate by offering our gifts to the church. Now, we do need to raise money for our congregations every year. It's an essential part of our ministry, and stewardship and pledge campaigns are the way we do that. But we always need to talk about it theologically. We need to talk about it holistically. Dina, do you have some ideas on that too?
Well, and I'm sort of sneaking ahead as you talk and maybe losing your thread as I start to develop new threads from the next question. I do think that big picture spiritual perspective, sort of the mile high view down over things, the money aspect is one piece that gets really loud for us, but it's really the whole piece. And an upcoming question is asking about, oh, hang on, my screen updated, is asking about how to do one campaign or lots of small campaigns for different kinds of efforts or ministries. And I will share, Davey, that this year, because our congregation turned 40 years old, we could not, it's great. I think we are the youngest New Start congregation in the Diocese of Maryland that has made it to parish status. I hope I'm wrong and that there's a newer one that I don't know about, but I think that's us. It takes a lot of energy, moxie, and resilience. Pardon my dog in the background. And so for our 40th anniversary, we weren't sure. We were going to have a big gala event in the fall and push towards paying down our mortgage debt on our new parish house. By new, I mean 2002. So it's not that new anymore, but we had $1 million of debt when I came to St. Andrews 12 years ago. We've done 2 capital campaigns separate from our stewardship campaigns, and it was down to about $40,000 this fall. So we asked the congregation, we gave everybody 2 pledge cards at the same time. faith-filled generosity and our standard issue stewardship annual campaign materials, plus a second pledge card that's about leaving a legacy for the future. So we had the annual campaign and we had a long-term legacy campaign right behind it, 2 different colors for those that printed it out or had it mailed to them. And on that second pledge card, we really put 3 different campaigns. We had our planned giving campaign materials on there so that we could know if we were in somebody's will, which we usually put on our normal pledge card. We just kind of bumped it over to that long-term giving. We also included a maintenance fund or a rainy day fund for the mechanical items in that 2002 building that will eventually soon need some replacing, and not very glamorous, but some people really cottoned to that and gave us lots of money for that fund. That matters to them, maintenance. And then the last piece was the payoff. So we kind of rolled it together in one campaign, but in other years we've separated things out. So it's a great question.
Good question.
Yep.
It's a creative way to approach a whole budget too. I do caution, so it's great when they're big projects like that, when it's about paying down debt or capital, certainly separating those out. But I always caution congregations about separating ministries out, like you can
Yes.
make a gift to the choir, but not to the youth program or something like that.
Right.
That starts to undermine our work as a community. So I fully embrace separating out big ticket items like a capital campaign, debt payoff campaign, something like that. But when we start to pick our ministries apart, then I think we run into some darker times with our fundraising efforts, because it starts to allow you to approve of one thing and not of another, but that's not how our budgets are created.
Yep. And there are a couple of other questions on here, Dave. We've got such engaged folks here. Catherine saying, love to attend, learn about capital campaigns, how to make them effective, how to begin and end. Is it more effective to have one capital campaign with many uses or different campaigns for each item, which is really what we're talking about. And we've done that in our congregation in different ways, depending on the climate, the tenor, the context, and based really on conversation, our own little internal feasibility studies with stakeholders. We've done different things, including hiring capital campaign consultants for the first big campaign. And then after that, really running it ourselves, having learned enough from those consultants to run it ourselves with leaders.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also getting a question in the chat to me that's saying, did our annual campaign suffer? Our regular pledges suffer?
Past that.
Yeah, that's a good question. And it hasn't.
No,
It hasn't.
never has.
Let's see, we're really right about where we were last year. I'm technically on vacation from the parish, so I haven't looked at our numbers over the last couple of weeks. But as of December, we were about where we were in past years. In fact, I think we were maybe $300 ahead on average pledge number. So that's good news, which also tells me something about information I didn't have about how are people faring in the congregation economically during COVID-19.
Mhm.
We've got a lot of government employees. People are still working very hard, and a lot of job stability in our region. And many of you are having very different situations depending, if you've got a mostly hospitality industry, community, so forth. So that gave me some pastoral information when I saw higher average pledges coming in this year.
Great, good stuff. We'll be doing, it sounds like we should do some work on capital campaigns. That might be something we develop this year and do some intentional work around. Lots of us have questions about capital campaigns.
Davey, the seminars, the webinars that you've done in the past, like virtual campaigns, are those archived on the TENS website, or can I say new?
Yeah.
Yeah.
When our new website launches, you'll really be able to find them easily. But
Awesome.
Our YouTube page has all of them. So if you go to our YouTube page and just type TENS, the Episcopal Network for Stewardship, into your YouTube browser, you will find all of our past webinars.
Great. And let's see. There's a couple of other questions. Are we building resources that appeal to members who are less tech savvy? Good question. If we are challenged by 2 sites in this meeting, it would be desirable but not likely practical to use multiple tools in that way with our own congregations, right? Some would just love the mentee, and others we'd still be talking about how to get on. It'd be very challenging. I still have some congregation members who won't or can't get on Zoom
Mhm.
or any of our worship online. So that's certainly something to be mindful of. We have another question here. How do we incorporate capital items like restoration of our church? We've already said we're going to have to talk about that in the future. Thank you for that question, Marianne. And rectory built in 1839. This is where being a newer congregation is easier, Marianne. God bless you and your people in caring for those old buildings. And Richard's asking, can you realistically launch that in the midst of a pandemic without getting negative feedback? So Davey, I do have 2 things to share around that. On the board of our camp and conference center, we're talking about some managing some change that needs to happen on that site, and if this is a good time to do that or not because of the pandemic. The pandemic means different things for a camp and conference center. It's pretty much, shut down. And so it's a good time to do some big project that would otherwise keep us from having summer camp, for example. In the parish, it's also a good time to repaint and fix that hole in the ceiling if you're not doing indoor worship. So I think some members of the congregation see that it's really an ideal time to get in there and fix some things that would otherwise inconvenience the congregation. And again, I think it really depends on your socioeconomic context, whether or not your folks are gainfully employed or are really suffering some economic setbacks right now.
It's
What do
true.
you think, Davey?
Fundraising is about hope, and it's about inspiring people, and it's about goal setting, right? And so um, always we should be asking people to participate, but we might need to do some work depending on where we are geographically, or as you say, how our community is responding right now. We might need to do some work with our goals. Should we ask for money and time and volunteers and for people to share their gifts? Absolutely. What we ask for or how much we ask for, I think that is case by case or pastoral even as we approach our campaigns. We have to remember that some people are doing just fine and some people are not. So if we don't ask, then the people who are not experiencing hardship don't get a chance to share their great gifts. And that's really important for us too.
That's right. So we have another question here from Sue about kind of the percentage of participation in pledging. This one is near and dear to my heart. So if I could take a try at this, she says, we have a congregation of about 90 members, of whom about 50 are pledging. This has been consistent over several years. What is realistic for a small congregation, especially when worship and engagement in the community are priorities? So I don't think that's a terrible statistic. I think that's quite high. 50, especially if we're talking households, if you've got 90 households and 50 of them are pledging, I think that's a pretty stable, especially if it's consistent from year to year. You've got this really core group that is consistently giving, which is wonderful. One of the things that some of us know from reading Father Richard Rohr is that we're all addicted to our own ways of thinking. And some of our congregation members are absolutely opposed to telling us what they're going to give in the coming year. They want to do it a different way for whatever reason. And I always want to leave room for whatever works for them. We have such deep-seated feelings and practices around our finances. And I think we can leave a lot of grace there for people to give in the ways they are most comfortable. I don't need everybody to be a pledger in the congregation. While that might be something we're taught in seminary, practically it is just not realistic. I do think also it depends for us being a congregation where most of our congregation, more than half, were not raised Episcopal. They come from other traditions or no tradition, and they come into the Christian church at St. Andrew's. And so we're doing a lot of teaching about, what is stewardship? What is a faithful approach to organizing your household, your economic life, how you live, decisions you make, where you work. So we're doing so much groundwork in that teaching piece. that I'm always happy if we just add a couple new pledges each year, and if there's some sign of growth, either that people are giving a little bit more, or we're inspiring more people to make that written commitment.
Sure. That's great. I totally agree with that. And, you know, it's also about how we count success in a campaign. Back to that Menti question that we had, right? What's success? And participation isn't always about how many pledge cards get turned in or how many gifts get made. There was a question earlier about people who aren't comfortable with the word pledge. We call them promises or intent for sharing or intention for giving, all these kinds of words that we can use. But there are other ways to count people as full members of the congregation, even if their gifts, their financial gifts, are small. How do they participate in the life of the community? How do they participate in the governance of the community? These things are really important too. And I'm going to move through some questions later where we talk about how to count those people and what to think about them. We should get moving on a little bit and maybe save some more questions if there's nothing pressing to come back to.
Let's.
Okay, great. So gratitude, it's how we begin and it's how we end. And it's not just words that we say or a temporary emotion. Gratitude is a discipline. It's a way of life. It's something that we have to incorporate. It's not always natural to all of us. It's not our first inclination. And so we have to do some work on it. So when I think about gratitude being the beginning and ending of a campaign, I think that we should start with the goodwill that everyone is going to participate. And we thank them for it. And we thank them for everything they've done, for volunteering, for their gifts, for their involvement in the community, right? So that's another way Episcopalians give, right? They serve on nonprofit boards in their community. They give to other things in the community, financially and through time and talent. Thank people for participating in the life, in the government, in communal life of our whole communities. This is about the things that we are grateful for. Thank you for raising a great family. Thank you for coming every Sunday. Thank you for all the kind messages that you send or the sermon critiques. Thank you for those too. Thank you for all the things that you do to participate in our life. And it's not just about the money, it's about everything that people offer. So handwritten notes, I think, are a really important discipline of gratitude at the end of a pledge campaign. And it works when you have small congregations and it works when you have large congregations. You just need more people writing notes, perhaps. These notes, I say, should not have financial data attached to them. So this is a heartfelt thank you for participating, not thank you for your gift of $5,000 or thank you for your weekly pledge of 120 or whatever people do, right? It shouldn't be about that. It should just be about thanking them. And then I put in this controversial note, even those who did not pledge or make a gift or an intent to give. Thank them too. They sat through the stewardship campaign. They were there every Sunday. They participated, and maybe they have gifts that will come through as well. So they get a note as well. Thank you for being a member of our community. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for being a part of us. They may give in ways that you don't know. So thank them for that and expect that they are, because that's who we are as Christians. We do these things. We are grateful. Are there any more questions about gratitude before we move on?
Let's see. Okay, so it says here, oh, we've got quite a few have come in. All right, this is what happens when I start listening and don't monitor the Q&A, Davey. I found that compelling, the whole, even those who did not pledge or make a gift. That gets me really going. It's very exciting. Let's see, can fundraising events be considered a stewardship campaign? How would you describe the difference to a congregation? That's a good question. Let me see if there's anything related to gratitude, because we can come back to some of these and group them later. Okay, very interested. Specific ministries. Okay. So not really about, well, one question here. Should the notes come from stewardship committee or the priest? That's one I would have expected. Very good, Julie and I. And then we've got another one from Don. Should thank you notes be customized for each person household?
Yeah. Well, I'll give a stab at that. And then Dina, I would love to hear what
Sure.
you have to say about it. We have two different roles in our stewardship committees. I'm a member and you're a priest. So we may have two different answers. I think that lay-led leadership is really important in stewardship. And I think it's really an important part of the gratitude process as well. And I think that when people have made their gift to the congregation, in whatever way they do, they like to hear it from their clergy. They like to hear that note of thanks. And so I think it's a really important discipline or practice for our clergy to be able to write those thank you notes. And they should be customized. Again, we're not including financial data, but it should have their, it shouldn't just be dear, generous person. It should be, I'm mindful of who you are and your family, and I'm thinking about you, or I'm praying about this thing that I know you're going through, or whatever. They take some time, just like the best thank you notes that we write to our relations for that sweater we didn't know we wanted. Put some time and thought into it. I do understand sometimes when you have a large number of thank you notes and maybe not a large number of clergy, that could get overwhelming. And so asking for help, asking your stewardship committee to write those often makes sense as well. So I'm not saying don't do it, but I think a lot of times we'd like to hear from our clergy. Dina, what do you think?
I think that I do this more on the phone or in person. So I do like to write thank you notes, and I happen to have pretty writing. So when I do them, I always hear back about, oh, you have such a neat writing, which is nice. And people like that personal touch. And it just takes a long time. It takes so long. But what I like to do is if I'm on the phone with you, Davey, then I would say, by the way, I want to thank you. You do so much in your work. For example, I'm thinking as you talk of somebody who works on the local hospice board. That's not a part of their church ministry per se. It's part of their Christian ministry. And I am so grateful for their participation on that board because it helps run something our community needs. Another parent is really involved in the PTA or the athletic boosters at the high school. And, so when I see somebody around or I see somebody, it's like catching a child doing something good. You're always supposed to catch a kid doing something good. To just pause and say, I want to just stop and thank you, or say, I admire how you are a leader in the congregation, which is one of my ways of saying I noticed.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful for you, is I'll say I admire. So some people get uncomfortable when you're looking them in the eyes and telling them they're great. And I'm okay with that. A note is a little bit more maybe dignified.
You bring up a good point that gratitude isn't just a one-way thing, right? So the discipline is making gratitude possible, but also receiving it, right?
Sure.
Knowing how to say, I'm humbled by your gratitude for me, right?
Yeah, right.
We're terrible at hearing thank you or for praise for things that we've done well. And that's a part of the gratitude exercise as well. So you're right. Sometimes it's uncomfortable when somebody says, great job, or thank you for that. But hearing it, living it, accepting it is really part of our ministry too.
It's part of creating that feedback loop, though, in a community that's going to be growth oriented. So being able to say what really worked and thank you, and you're doing really important work by volunteering or doing, by your generous gifts towards the new piano or whatever it was, or by taking the leadership on that project. I think people say, okay, somebody knew that I did all that, because sometimes people feel taken advantage of in nonprofits or in church life.
Great. Well,
All right.
how are we doing? Shall we move on?
I'm ready if you are.
I am. So let's talk about the numbers. Let's talk about analyzing your stewardship campaign and what that looks like. So we want to know, these are the questions that you ask your committee. This is the question you ask when you look at your pledge analysis, when all the numbers come in. So what's the total amount pledged? Is it up or is it down by what percentage? That's a question that we know we should ask. Well, so this gets to that participation. So how many people made commitment cards? So there's a gross number of how much you raised, but then how much do people participate? Is that, and how is that in relation to other years? This helps you understand, is my message getting out there? Are we making compelling materials? Are more people pledging this year than last year? Also could give you a good barometer of how things are going in the community. So if there was a decrease in what someone gave from last year, that's good to know too, for the same reasons. Is there something happening in the community? Is that person's life affected? These are pastoral questions. I saw a question earlier, should the priest know what people give? And I don't want to wade too deep into that water, but I will say that when we think about the way Episcopalians often express their concerns, it's through our checks, through our stewardship. And so sometimes when somebody's giving drops off and you don't know why, it's a chance to understand, maybe there's something here. Maybe I should if the treasurer is the only person looking at the numbers and the clergy aren't, maybe it's just enough to say, hey, you should really check in with Davey. His pledge is way off from last year. There's something going on. And that might be enough, right? So I will leave it to further conversations another day to describe should clergy know or not. But should they know when there's something different? Absolutely. It's a way to help them help our congregations. How many commitments cards stayed the same? So again, so are people in that plateau? We're going to talk, we're going to offer a training later this year on lifting ourselves out of the pledge plateau. I'll give what I gave last year for the last 10 years. Even though we know that our costs go up and our incomes go up and all kinds of things change in our lives, people are giving the same gift year over year. It's time to check in with them about that. And if you introduced electronic giving, did that number increase from last year? So people get more and more comfortable with online giving. This helps you understand how much should I invest in my online giving tools. If you're putting a whole lot of money but not getting a whole lot of return, then your congregation loves paper and they want to keep going with that. If year by year you're seeing more people giving online, then shifting more of your campaign to think about online giving is the way to go. Well, what do the numbers teach us? Well, they are a practical measure of our expected revenue. They're a small window, and I say small because it doesn't give us the whole picture, but it does give us a little window into the capacity and generosity of our donors. When we go later and we look at running a capital campaign, the first place we look is, how are people doing their pledging? What are the kinds of gifts that are coming in? What can I expect? And so it's a little window into how much capacity or generosity they have. And it's also a measure of how they feel impacted or they are adopting the mission, right? If things are resonating with them, they're generous, they're giving, they're loving it, they're excited about it. The numbers can tell us that, but they don't tell us the whole story. It's really good to report on your numbers. You should let everybody know, but you also have to analyze them. So as you close out last year's pledge campaign, do a little deep dive on those numbers. Get in there and really see, are people increasing and decreasing? How many commitments am I getting? Ask those questions that we just went through to your stewardship committee, to your treasurer, to your pledge recording secretary, whoever those people are. Ask them those questions and do some analysis on them. And then look at them over time. This is really important too. We often say, okay, done and dusted, that was this year's stewardship, but how does it compare with 2019 and 2018 and 2017? This is important because it gives us some trending. Are people in our community making more money? Are they feeling more tightened? Are they reacting to our message? What happened in that year that made the numbers so odd as opposed to this year? When you look at trends over time, you get a little bit more of an insight into how things are really going. And if there are unexpected things, so people give and then all of a sudden they fall off, again, these are opportunities for some pastoral conversations. Dina, do we have any questions about numbers?
We do. And you may, as you're tracking each year's metrics, the data that you're collecting, one thing that we have found really useful, our stewardship chair naturally just does this, but I'm realizing it tells more of the story. She puts a little asterisk for special things we did during that year's campaign, so we can remember what year was the cottage meeting used? What year did we drop bread off door to door? What year did we say we need 17% more and 17 more pledges? You know, we had a year where 17 was the number. And what year was that, so that we don't repeat, and we're tracking not only the kind of the deliverables, the financial elements, but some of the other pieces that are coming along as well. So yeah, one of the questions that's coming up, Davey, is when there's transition going on in the congregation, it can be really hard to write these thank yous or to know who. And you know, in another hat I wear, I consult with congregations that are in rector searches. And those parishes and those parish leaders are already working so hard to tap somebody in the congregation to thank everybody for pitching in more during that interim phase could be a really important stewardship gift.
Mm-hmm.
And here's a question, I'm just sort of putting them together here, Davey. The question is, you know, with knowing the amount people give and so forth, what do you think, Davey, about sending out thank you cards, not after the pledge campaign, but at some other point during the year, or intermittently a couple a month?
I love it. I think that's great. And in
To
fact,
disentangle it, you know?
in my congregation, our rector sends them out on your birthday, comes in your birthday card, and it's a thank you for everything you do for the congregation, right? And that's a great way to do it. So there was a formal thank you letter that went out after the pledge campaign. You gave this much, it was really great, we love it. And then there's this note that comes on my birthday, which is months after a pledge campaign. It's actually into the next pledge campaign. And it thanks me for everything that I've done. And it's just unattached. It's really beautiful. So I like that too. Keep it going. You don't have to, just as we're grateful for people all the time when they pop into our heads, that's the time to write the note. So
Yeah.
whatever your habit is a good one. It's just important to do it.
I love that. I think, and I, as a sole parish priest with part-time staff members and lots of busy lay leaders who are already way into other things, I think I could manage, you know, sitting down once a month with a lay leader and writing out several, you know, to do that periodically might work better for some of us. So I like having it unattached from the campaign so
Mhm.
that, and then you kind of, people get to talking, right? They
Yeah.
kind of learn about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
I want to answer Pam's question
Mhm.
from Grace in Southgate about the what to do with people who don't write out a pledge card and how to base your budget on it. And we all do that, whether our diocese requires us to base our budget on it or not. We all base our budget sometimes on people who we know will never fill in a pledge card, but we know make that faithful gift every year, right? And over time, you can tell, oh, Davey's going to make that $1,500 gift in December because he's done it every year. That's how he likes to give. And so I wouldn't trick your diocese by filling out a fake pledge card. That's not right. But I would communicate in some way that we know that there are some people and they will give about this much money and they don't fill out a pledge card. And so we are basing our budget on a number that we feel really strongly is a real number. And in general, it's no more real than somebody filling out a pledge card, right? Because we always remind people that as things change in the year, if they lose their job, if they get a new job and they can increase their pledge, right? So your pledge can change whether or not you fill out a pledge card. So the same way, if you have people that you know will give, and you need to base your budget on it and your diocese requires numbers, just communicate that. It's really important to not dismiss their gifts because they're a part of your life and your congregation.
That's great, Davey. I think that I would call those givers of record. If somebody has been giving around the same amount or a substantial amount for the last 5 or 6 years, I would put a little asterisk and say, we also have 6 other givers of record, their combined pledges total, whatever, because that they're faithful with that in the way that they can be. And again, that's where people sometimes they're wounded by another denomination or another church experience, or that's just not what they can do. And especially if you're working with folks from different cultural backgrounds, and they have different cultural perspectives on how to participate fully.
Yep.
So here's an interesting one. Richard says, they're all interesting, but Richard, this is a doozy. My previous parish, a large one, had data about how much people were earning. This was a bit creepy. How would they have accomplished this? And Davey, I can probably take a stab at this. I know that when we worked with a really great capital campaign consultant, that somebody came in and they ran some numbers. They knew that we had so many people that worked for NSA, the National, we just call it NSA, National Security Administration. And they know those government jobs, and they know what level is in the, or at the Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Laboratory down the road. There's sort of an area they could kind of bracket, ballpark salaries for some of those government jobs or private jobs. And so I know they had some formula or logarithm to figure some of that out based on giving, the amount that their house was worth. I don't know how deep they went into it, but they had those numbers. I didn't want to know those numbers, but I was glad that they could help us find a good number that we could reasonably ask for and attain. That was still a bit of a stretch ask. So my guess is some of those logarithms have come into play.
Oh, sure. And, fundraising, nonprofits have perfected the art of fundraising, and there are many tools available. And it's about your relationship with your donors, how you want to engage that data. It comes from public data out there, so you can find out home value, and you can figure out, as Dina was saying, you can figure out industry averages for jobs and get a pretty good snapshot of what a household generates. But what you don't know, unless you do yet even more research, which is also, is how they're spending that money. Are they paying for kids in college? Are they, supporting the symphony? Whatever. And those are things that as pastor, you do know. You do know if they are sending kids to private schools. You do know if they're having a medical emergency. So they can live in the biggest house in the neighborhood, but you might not expect the biggest pledge from them because you know what's going on. And that's important data too. So it is a little creepy to do too much analysis. You can go deep into that rabbit hole of research, and there are companies that you can pay to look at your data and all that. But I think the church doesn't, we're not ready for that. And that's not the way we operate.
I agree with you 100%, Davey. I do think it might be helpful in establishing capacity. It's not necessarily what will indicate generosity in a practical way. So, some of the, and we could all, tell stories for the next couple hours about what generosity really means. And sometimes people have a lot of wealth or resources because they have not been generous in the past in these ways. They've accumulated. So there's all, doesn't necessarily mean that they will give it anyway.
Yep. Great. All right, it's 11 here, so I'm going to move us along a little bit and keep going because we have 28 minutes left. I want to make sure we get through our stuff. We'll come back and answer any questions. So we talked about numbers. So what about the feelings? And these are important things to ask your stewardship committee as well, and to do in your analysis of your pledge campaign. Did people feel that you shared enough information? Were people inspired and informed? And there was a question about this in our first presentation. Did the program have the right tone for your congregation? So were you missing the mark, or were people really engaged? Were they really excited about it? Did you offend anyone? Did you inspire anyone? These are things that you can know based on the results, but also you have to engage in some deep conversation with your congregation about it. Was there a sense of joy and fun, right? So if your stewardship campaign is about it's that time again every year, here we do it, that's how people are going to make their gift, right? But if you are excited about what the ministry empowers, what our gifts do in the world, and there's joy and there's fun and there are events and there's, whatever, even online we can make beautiful community out of this experience. So have some fun, have some joy. Sometimes we extend our campaigns a little too long. We're not quite there with our numbers, so we're going to go another week, another 2 weeks, and all of a sudden people are like, "Please stop. We're done now." And you can tell, you can tell based on how much they fidget that they're done with this campaign. So, how did your campaign run? Was it just the right amount of time? Was it too short to engage enough people? Was it too long so that people started getting itchy? Was the focus on the Bible or the bills? I love this question, right? So are we talking about our traditions around generosity and abundance as ways to inspire people to give? Or are we focusing on we have bills to pay and expenses that are real and those sorts of things that are also motivating for fundraising, but might not be mission-based or what we do in our churches. And then again, was the focus more on the mission or the budget? So budgets are great. They're how we pay our bills. They're how we pay our clergy. They're how we support our lives, but they're all about how we support our mission. And if the goal of your budget is just to pay bills and turn the lights on and keep a church open, that's maybe not enough to inspire people. What are you doing with the money that you raise? How does your community have impact? I'll share a really quick story about an organization called Partners for Sacred Spaces that put out a study in 2016 called the Generosity Project, I think. And what it said was that every house of worship in the United States, every temple, mosque, synagogue, church, contributes an average of $1.1 million to its community just by being there, through meeting space, through advocacy, through the work that it does, seen and unseen. The average church, we're talking about tiny churches to mega churches, the average across the United States is $1.1 million just for being there. That's a really important metric. So when you think about what is my money going for, what's our budget here, why does this church exist, you are having an impact and value in your community. Think about that and remember that. What do we learn? What does it teach us about asking the right questions? Well, that helps us understand how do we interact with our mission? How excited about our mission are we? If it didn't feel like fun, if it didn't have joy, then we need to perhaps look at our messaging. How are we reacting to it? Is our stewardship committee really bored of doing this work? Have they been doing it for too many years? Are clergy kind of burned out on asking for money? How can we give them some renewal? How can we give them some new tools? How can we give a new approach to it? Budgets are more than bills. Members connect with mission. This is really important for us to remember that we have to focus on that thing that we do. All of our outreach, all of our inreach, the things that make us a community. That's why we raise money and why we ask for people to volunteer their time and give their wisdom to us. And if members didn't respond, it might be the approach, not the mission. So remember that if you had less than stellar results and you can attribute it to a downturned economy or some other sort of disturbance in the force, you have to think about maybe our approach to raising this money was wrong. Maybe they love our mission, but maybe we were asking the wrong way. We weren't using the right materials. Maybe we didn't have the right program. I'm going to keep going through a couple of other slides and then we'll catch up. Asking the right questions about reflection. How do we then take everything we've learned about our feelings and our numbers and begin to reflect on it? So what did you learn that you want to make a change for next year? So really deep question for our stewardship committees to embrace. So don't run last year's program. Dina said that she has a little asterisk and she remembers this year we did this and this year we did that. That's super important, right? Because what you don't want to do is say, we're doing last year's program, because then you're going to get last year's results. So think about that, reflect on that. What do you want to make sure that you do? So this isn't just about your campaign, but what do we need to do throughout the year to keep people focused and inspired? What don't you want to do? So this is, again, was my approach wrong, but the mission is right? So if you felt like there was a clunker somewhere in there, pay attention to that and learn and move on from it. What are the quantitative and qualitative goals that you might set for next year's program? We're going to talk in a little bit about goal setting and what that looks like. Finally, how's your committee? Do they need a little vacation? Do they need a retreat? Do they need a box of chocolates? How do you thank them for what was really hard work? Stewardship, we said at the beginning, it's challenging. We're tired sometimes from it. We feel unappreciated. Maybe we even feel a little offended or assaulted, right? So people were like coming at me with their questions. Give your stewardship committee a little time after you've had this meeting to regroup and think about it. So finally, after it's all done, after your stewardship campaign is over, ask your committee back for that final meeting where you ask these questions and you reflect. Maybe you celebrate, maybe you nourish them, maybe you give them the gratitude and the thanks that they deserve. Follow up, of course, with gifts that you expected in your campaign but that didn't come. Personal calls, emails. Many of us don't answer our phones when they ring, and so email is better. You know your people, do what makes sense to them. Take a little moment before you close the folder on 2020 stewardship to analyze the trends and say, do I need to have any pastoral conversations with people? What happened in my community? And then thank them. If that's a public display at a church service, if that's a coffee hour, that's a virtual thank you, that's naming everyone. Remind people that some people in their church did some really hard work. Finally, I want to talk about these pastoral conversations really briefly. So when I realize that somebody's pledge or their gift is off, so maybe they're not giving, maybe they decreased their gift, maybe they refuse to pledge, but they always do in other years, I want to ask some questions. And I don't want to say, why didn't you give? But what I do want to say is, what's going on? And how are you engaging with us? So some responses to that are, what means the most to you about our community? What is it about our church or our ministry that you love? Why did you make the decision to support or not support the church this year financially? This is not a gotcha question. This is a, I really want to know question. And it means something to me, and your answer means something to me. What are we not doing? So maybe you think we should be opening a daycare center, or maybe you think we should be cleaning up the parks, or maybe you think, do you have a mission idea, a ministry idea, something that would excite you, something that we could mobilize around, maybe a ministry you want to lead? So what are we doing that's not resonating, or what aren't we doing that could be? What are your personal and professional goals and struggles? I love this question because it's, again, not about, and so then why are you going to give or not give? But how can we support you? When people are going through a career change, who do you know in the congregation that works in that career? How can you set them up to have lunch or coffee and they can learn about it, right? Or if somebody is struggling and they're willing to share that struggle, how can you connect them with resources that can help them? We are a community of people who are deeply capacious and deeply interconnected and deeply connected to the communities around us. So remember that our congregations are rich with people power and conversations that could help people. Finally, if you didn't make a gift this year, would you consider it in another year? Or should we just expect other things from you at pledge time? Are there other ways that you'd like to be acknowledged? If you're never going to make a gift, I don't want to keep making this awkward conversation with you. But what are the things that we can do? Fundraising is a cycle. Oh wait, this is our next slide. So we're done. This is, let's talk about analyzing before we talk about preparing. Dina, what are some quick questions that have come in about our 2020?
So lots of good questions in here. The one I want to pull up is Cathedral 2 says, I hope we're not asking how you are and is there any way we can help you? Or I hope we are asking, is there any way we can help you? And I'm thinking everything you just said, Davey, is strange theoretically, but if we have a personal relationship with folks, it's either a lot easier or a lot harder. It kind of depends. And our tone really matters. And so I'm thinking on these conversations, whether I've noticed somebody's not coming to church anymore, or I understand from the treasurer that they didn't pledge this year. And when they got called about it, they said, no, we're not pledging, and just kind of hung up. That definitely, that kind of behavior, if it's a big change anyway, deserves some contact. And so my in-person instinct is always to start with prayer and to set that tone and to get to that spiritual relationship so that first and foremost, I'm not seen as some sort of tax collector, pledge collector sort of thing, or bill collector, but rather they're somebody who wants to be their spiritual companion through whatever's going on. Sometimes it's about what's going on in politics and how they perceive their community. Sometimes it's really their employment. I can think of a family that really had some major stressors in their family around a child dealing with addiction. And we were able to, or I was able to very confidentially connect them with another family that had a lot of wisdom to share. And so those can be really wonderful conversations that who cares about the pledge campaign in that moment? It's what's going to fortify, strengthen that household, that family, that person, and their relationship with God so that they can stay as strong as they can be and face whatever they're facing.
Great. I love that. Thank you for that. It's so important. The tone is really important. Jane asks us how we can use social media to keep stewardship alive through the year. And I love that question, Jane. Thank you for asking it, because it does, we can put out little questions, right? Using our Facebook or our Twitter or whatever it is that your congregation connects with. They can relate to a Bible passage, something in the gospel. What's a stewardship message about this? And that's not about how to wring more money out of you. It's about how to keep the thought about gratitude, generosity, and abundance alive. Each of those are touching people, because social media, I know we don't think about it as pastoral, but it is in a way, right? It's kind of personal. It's kind of public too. It's a very strange thing that we have with our social media. So do use it to keep the conversation going and to engage people in the question.
Davey, it sounds like it really worked for Jane's congregation. So I'm even wondering, Jane, if you would send Davey a list of those social media posts so that you can share those examples with others who maybe haven't done anything like that. That sounds really exciting.
Great.
Since you had such a good response, that'd be helpful.
I see lots of comments about wanting year-round stewardship information. I'm going to give a couple of pointers today, but I hear that there is a great desire to have a deeper conversation about that. So we'll schedule that. We'll engage that. Sounds like a good future webinar, and we'll let you all know when that's going to happen. I'm going to move us along so that we can get into preparing for your next campaign. So the campaign never ends, and that's not a depressing statement. It just changes phases, right? So we do our campaign, we reflect on it, we plan, we recruit, we form our members theologically, and we repeat, right? We don't repeat it the same way or in the same method as last year, but campaigns are going to come around every year. If we embrace them and prepare for them, then it doesn't surprise us every August. And we're like, oh my gosh, I have to run stewardship. No, we're ready for it. We're ready for it because we've been thinking about it, because it's a cycle. You should talk about generosity and gratitude as often as you can, from your newsletters, from your pulpit, from your conversations. If you're on diocesan staff, you should be talking about it all the time with your congregations. How can we keep the conversation going? It starts with setting good goals. So how do we do some goal setting about next year's campaign? Well, so it starts with how you analyzed it, right? So what were the trends? What did you learn? What messages worked? What messages didn't work? Do you need to create some other kinds of goals? And I call these soft goals. One of the things that a congregation here in the Diocese of California does that I really love is that the rector has a goal every year for how many new members she wants to see. And she doesn't just keep that hidden and hope that they come. She tells everyone all year long, we're hoping for 10 more families this year. What that does is it inspires everybody, right? Well, okay, she keeps asking, maybe I'm gonna invite someone, right? It lets everybody know that there's a goal. We do this with our stewardship campaigns often too, right? So our goal is this much or a percentage above that last year or whatever. When people know what the goal is, they can know how to help you get there. This is really important in our congregations. Your goals should be achievable. They should be aspirational. So that's to say that you shouldn't make them out of reach, but you should push people a little, right? It's a goal. We want people to feel excited about it. Some examples could be that 50% of our folks will increase their giving over last year. That's a really good goal to have in a campaign. So then what do I need to do to get there, right? Or some people who have never made a gift, 2 of them will, and it'll be beautiful. And we'll have this conversation and we'll set that as a goal. So these goals are not necessarily about your budget or about your amount. They're about the things that we can do for each other. A couple more thoughts. So again, I talked about your goals for growth and the other things. So our fundraising, our mission isn't just about running a campaign and asking people to participate in it, but all kinds of messaging goes into impacting how our members feel about our mission. So that could be refreshing that newsletter. So if you're doing the same newsletter every week, you're just changing out the announcements, but you're not writing articles anymore because they take too long and you're already writing a sermon, get someone to help you in the congregation to take on the newsletter ministry and get some new information, get people excited about it. Don't forget your website, right? A lot of people use them both to find church and to find information about their church. So update it, refresh it. Create new materials. If you've been using last year's material and you just changed the date on it, it might be time to tell some new stories, find some new testimonials, get some new pictures. I realize in 2020, there weren't a whole lot of pictures we could take about ministry happening, and it looks like in 2021, that could be the same, but do find some ways to refresh your materials.
Davey, the exception being some of us like the picture of ourselves from 10 years ago better than our.
So much better.
So yeah,
I
if I could pop one serious thing in there, Davey, you talked about the goal, the what of the goal, that this many families, this many new pledges, this many new members. I think my congregation, like many of yours out there, are really astute people, professionals, highly educated folk. And I've worked in congregations that were different from this dynamic socioculturally as well. And it's still true. People want to know why. Why do you want new families? Why do you want more pledges? And I think if I have any success in asking, it's because the why is clear, because I want a handbell program for the whole community every Thursday afternoon so that we pull in X amount of families from any background, whether or not they ever, darken the door of the church
Mhm.
for other reasons, or, but a couple of concrete things on why would be really critical, at least for the congregations I've served.
So important. Thank you for saying that. Yeah, we have to give people the why of it. So let's keep going with our plans, and then I have a few more slides, and we'll finish up with all of your questions and have a little bit of time for that. So do put some things in your plan, right? So it's not just about, I hope that they like my stewardship pitch. I hope that we do some stuff this year, but make a concrete list. And I've given you a few suggestions. And invite the diocese in or some expert who can talk about generosity. Invite them in for a coffee hour or for a Zoom webinar. Read a book, and I'll give you some suggestions at the end of this on some things we can read. Shake up your newsletter. Talk about metrics and measures and impact. Make sure you send out those quarterly pledge reminders. Let people know how they're doing. Each of them is an opportunity not just to update people on the money that's being raised or the number of hours that are being volunteered, but on the work that's being accomplished. And you can include a story, a testimonial, someone from one of your ministries who's doing something great. You can include that. So we also have to recruit the team. So thank you, Bishop Edwards. Our stewardship committee should be in place by Easter. That's scary. It's already almost Mardi Gras. So here we go. So how do we recruit the right people to serve on a stewardship team? An effective team, they're going to raise money to do more than fund the mission. They will engender the support from all the other parish ministries. So that's to say, they'll be inclusive. They'll talk about everyone and all of our work. A rising tide floats all boats. It's a chance for members of the team to deeply form their own relationships. Those people who have served on a close community like stewardship become friends, lifelong friends. I've met some of my best ones working in stewardship. It's hard work, and so that gives us a loving community within our community. And they spread that generosity through their own actions. So you have more storytellers in your congregation. You have more people talking about generosity and abundance. You want people who know people. So people who are well connected, who have friends in the congregation, who can get their friends along to do things. These are the people you want on your stewardship committee. You want people who have a demonstrable love for the congregation. And that's not just your longest members, that could be new and inspired members as well. So people who really love the work you're doing. How they feel about the congregation will come through and how they talk about it and how they explain their own generosity. People with a heart for stewardship. So this is to say, don't put warm bodies on your committee because you need to fill numbers. Stewardship is hard work and it isn't everybody's work, right? So it's awkward to ask for money. It's awkward to talk about gifts in church. It's a conversation that's really hard to have. Have people who are okay with it, who are ready to either learn it or do it. Don't invite someone who's like, I hate talking about money. There are other committees for them to serve on. People with skills. So, people who can run a meeting, get things done. People who have a credibility within the congregation. When they speak, people listen to them. You want to recruit them to your committee. People with time. So, right, none of us has time, but you can find people who say, I will show up to these meetings. I will do the work. And people who make their own gifts. Finally, throughout the year, I want to give us some tools on how we can keep the conversation of theological formation going. I love this quote from Desmond Tutu. Like humility, generosity comes from seeing that everything we have and everything we accomplish comes from God's grace and God's love for us. Certainly, it is from experiencing this generosity of God and the generosity of those in our life that we learn gratitude and to be generous to others. This is really important. We learn from each other. Generosity is a skill that needs cultivating. It needs nurturing. Any good gift planted, it needs to be loved. So here are 4 things you can do this year to keep the conversation going. Do a book study, and I offer 2 here. Henry Nouwen's amazing Spirituality of Fundraising, which you can read in 15 minutes and feel great about. Another quick read is Charles Clowen's 1 Minute Stewardship. These are quick reads. You can do a little book study around them. They're full of beautiful, inspirational ideas on why we raise money in church and how we can keep those conversations going. Do a mid-year budget and mission review. So this is sort of like a mini annual meeting. And it happens where we invite people who are doing ministry to talk about how it's going, to share their stories, to say, here's our budget year to date. The vestry looks at it every month, but does the congregation get to see? We're on track, we're off track. Gives them a way to give people a way in. I realize that we're at our time. I have 2 more slides and then we'll have some questions. Engage in storytelling. So ask people to deeply do maybe a small group, maybe take your Wednesday group or your Tuesday morning group or something, and really ask them some deep questions. What is money? What does it mean to me? How's my attitude changed? Get them to really roll up their sleeves and be a little uncomfortable and vulnerable with each other. Ask some deep theological questions about money. Finally, preach a stewardship sermon in July for no reason. Just preach it. Get excited about it. Find that message. Find that meaning. TENS will release a monthly reflection, which you can use in your sermon prep. It'll take the gospel for a Sunday or for a month and sort of summarize it and give you a place to start. But do your own sermon. Preach about it when it's not about filling out your pledge form, when it's just about keeping the conversation alive. Finally, our theme for this year is Every Perfect Gift. And it's about the metamorphosis, the transformation of how our gifts are created when they come from God and they're put in our hands and we give them back to God. What transformation occurs? And that's why we use this theme of the butterfly and the chrysalis to sort of talk about what is that transformative power of our giving. We hope that this message and this theme will inspire you, and all of our materials this year will sort of reflect on that transformation work of giving. Finally, as Dina mentioned, we are rebuilding our website. So Bernie Sanders approves, he's very excited about it. So we will launch a new website on February 1st, which will be completely refreshed. We'll have much more accessibility and put all of our resources more easily in your hands. So please be excited with us. Check tens.org on February 1 or maybe February 2, it depends. And come back. We'll be letting you know about this all year long. I realize that we are at our time, but Dina, are there some questions we can answer before people have to scoot off?
The questions have petered off and are mostly wondering about how to get more resources from TENS, especially on that year-round piece, which is great. And I love Donna's last, more of a comment than question. We try to make all of our fundraising include raising, and food included does not hurt. I serve in an eating parish and a feeding and eating parish. And so I get that. And that's actually been one of the great challenges as we connect so much over food and we share our stories and our lives over meals. It's been very difficult during COVID to do that differently. So I can understand Donna's perspective about fundraising and having food. I also, let's see, I want to say from all of you, who, like me, maybe take the month of August to go do something fun with your family or just get away from ministry if you are ordained, especially August is one of those months where we might be away. And then you come back and you realize the stewardship meeting with the stewardship team is on the calendar tonight. And you have desperately gotten onto the TENS website and tried to remember how to log on. I am really grateful to Davey and all those that have created such beautiful materials so that our messaging is consistent and theologically sound. It has been such a good tool that's not the way to do it. I know that that is not ideal, but sometimes there are those years where you've only got a little bit of time before that meeting, and having such beautifully designed, graphically pleasing materials ready to go is such a gift for a parish the size of the one I'm in. So thank you, Davey and TENS, for all that work over the years. It's borne great fruit, and we've never said thank you to TENS.
Thank you for that. It's a pleasure to lead TENS in this work and to provide these resources. So I'm going to finish up this webinar and remind you all that I will send you the chat and the Q&A so that you can see the questions and the answers. You provided so much. You provided so much of this content today, so I thank you for doing that. We will send a link with all the resources that we've mentioned. That study I mentioned about community impact, somebody asked for that. I'll get you a link for that. All the mentions of things that we've talked about, I will get you those resources, as well as the slides, as well as the YouTube of this. So you can see it and you can recreate it and you can share this in your community. It is a gift for you all, as you are a gift to us. Thank you for giving us this beautiful work to do in community and for all of your support. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to say one thing I'm going to put into the chat here, which is I'm going to ask you to do a survey. You didn't think you were going to get away without a survey, did you? And also to sign up for our Eventbrite page, which is where we show all of our, where we share all of the trainings that we'll be doing throughout the year. If you sign up to receive notifications from Eventbrite, you'll know when we do. When we're offering a training, you'll be able to sign up for it. So thank you so much. Thank you all of you for your participation today. Enjoy your Saturday. Thank you, Dina.
And Davey, thank you for living into what you're teaching us. You're surveying us on how to, how to evaluate. And here we're having an opportunity to evaluate this, which is just really faithful. So thank you for really demonstrating some of the tools that we can use.
I just put the survey link into the chat. If you see it, it's a survey monkey. So I'll post it again. It's in the chat. I will also include it in the email that you'll all get. So if you don't catch it now, you'll see it later.
Many of us have learned new tools for surveying congregations about how they feel about in-person worship or outdoor worship over this very strange past year. And so I think this is just another reminder that we have a lot of tools at our disposal for evaluating the ways we communicate about stewardship.
Great. Well, thank you, friends. Thank you for your time and your attention to this. Dina, thank you for your collaboration and for serving.
Always fun to work with you, Davey. I learned so much.
We all learned. I learned today. All right, friends, we'll talk to you soon. Thank you.